Tomlin Paul, Deputy Principal, UWI Mona, Reverend Carl Henning, Pastor Gregory Park Baptist Church, Dr. Marcia Rainford, former Director of the School of Education, Professor Zillian Jennings-Craig, former Director of the School of Education, Dr. Therese Ferguson, Coordinator of Graduate Studies in the School of Education, Professor Stafford Griffith, former Director of the School of Education, and Professor Paul Miller, CEO and Principal of the Institute for Equity at the University Center. Other distinguished guests, family, friends, good evening. My name is Zoya Kincaid Clark, and I am very pleased to be chairing today's events. I'm here in the capacity of Deputy Dean of Graduate Studies in the Faculty of Humanities and Research. I'm also bringing greetings on behalf of the Dean in my capacity as Acting Dean while she's away, and I'm also here in my capacity as friend and colleague of Carmel Roofe, who we are celebrating. Today we gather here to celebrate the work and the legacy and the significant milestone for Carmel. This evening serves as a moment when the university says, congrats, job well done. But for those of us who know Carmel, we know that we have already said that. The university has given her a platform, and she's going to stand on that platform and speak. And the university says that she's going to share her research and her significance, and she's going to talk about how and what she has done to contribute to this professional milestone. But while significant and important, for those of us who have long worked with Carmel over the years, we've understood that she's checked all those boxes many years ago. She's exuded a relentless and unwavering passion for excellence, commitment, and discipline. And for those of us here, we understand that this discipline and reaching this pinnacle is nothing that was unexpected. We understand that in the academy, we have to celebrate this moment. But we who have worked with her in the School of Education and in the Faculty of Humanities and Education, we understand that we have seen this coming a very long time. We understand that reaching this milestone, Carmel, was not about working in the trenches. It was late nights, early mornings, sacrifices. It was also a strong recognition of the person and that being who made you wake up those early mornings, who made you go to bed those late nights, God. We understand that you see him as an important and the most important being why you have reached this milestone. Carmel, congratulations. You have achieved what you set out to do. Colleagues, thank you so much for being here as we celebrate this moment with her. We're going to be tight, we're going to be very sweet. And as we progress, Carmelite, when I asked her, what would you like me to do? She said, Zoya, begin at 6 o'clock, start on time. And so you noticed I was here before 6 or 1 minute to 6. But for those of us who are here, as we proceed through these events, we're going to hear from persons who are significant to Carmel. And these are persons who have guided, supported, and uplifted her. But also importantly, we are going to hear from persons who she has guided, supported, and uplifted. Colleagues, I ask that as we proceed through today's events, we first, as Carmel has always done, invited the presence of the Lord. I will now going to invite Reverend Carl Henning, pastor of the Gregory Park Baptist Church, to do this. Following this, we're going to have greetings, first by Dr. Tomlin Paul, and then I will come back.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we acknowledge you to be the origin, the giver, and the fount of all life and wisdom. You bring us to birth, and by your grace, you enable us amidst the varying circumstances of life to find meaning in our days. And you offer to us opportunities to be enriched by our interaction with each other. We gather this evening mindful that we are gathering in the aftermath of the recent hurricane, which has in some parts of the country left a trail of devastation and death. And in all parts of this nation, a pall of gloom has descended. Our hearts cry out and our minds are consumed with realities more than we can bear, and yet we know that in every generation, your people across the world have managed to rise from the ashes of despair and the threat of darkness into new places and experiences of life. For that we pray. And in praying, we make ourselves available to hear, to help, and to heal. We're grateful to you, God, for the gift of knowledge and intellect and insight, and then the inspiration to use our gifts to enable others to rise above the limiting circumstances set against them. Through transformative programs of education at all levels of schooling, hope has been inspired. Worldviews have been shaped. And in all this, helping to reorder and to reshape our society. We thank you for this institution of the University of the West Indies and the School of Education, and the part that they play in challenging and changing perspectives and ways of thinking as they contribute to the ongoing project of liberating a people still shadowed by the tyranny of slavery and colonialism toward a path of freedom in all its forms. We thank you this evening specially for the gift of our friend, colleague, family member, and fellow laborer, Carmel, who now leads the school, and for the ways in which her own career has been undergirded by a commitment to diligent research in the service of national development. Grant to her all the graces she needs this evening as she leads us in this inaugural professorial lecture. And may we be attentive to listen, to learn, and to be transformed. We pray through Jesus Christ, O Lord. Amen.
Standing on the protocols of our chair. Yes, thank you. Professor Zoya Kincaid-Clark, allow me to stand on those protocols that were established. Thank you. I want to acknowledge as I do that, we have quite a distinguished community here this evening. We have our former heads of the School of Education. Yeah, somebody said yeah? Let's give them a yeah. Give them a yeah clap. Yeah? I know we have our former leaders, our deans, our heads of departments. We have current heads of departments, current head of school, of course, Professor Carmel Roofe. We have our deans. I see some of our deans, current deans who are here, members of the university administration, the Faculty of Humanities and Education, and our students. I want to also welcome you. I especially want to welcome, of course, our distinguished, I say distinguished speaker, because she really is this evening our distinguished speaker in carrying forth her inaugural address. And ladies and gentlemen, I think she deserves a special, very warm welcome again, Professor Carmel Roofe. Yes. And indeed we have to recognize as we celebrate with Professor Roofe, the community, and we talk, a good scholar and a professor has many families. We have our academic family, our local family here, and no doubt that family, I know for Professor Roofe, extends across the road, not just here at Mona. We're very happy to welcome our colleagues from UTech who are here. But also I want to have a special welcome for her family, yeah, who are here. Family members, I think mom and her daughter is here. To recognize that indeed you're an important part of this work that we're celebrating today. When I called Dean Edwards Carr just to check in to say, are we still on? And she said, yes, definitely. I was very, very pleased because, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we are going through a difficult time with the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa. And even when we were not immediately affected or particularly affected in terms of we still have our roofs and our water and all of that, we are all feeling it. We are all feeling it, no doubt about it. There's a sense of something in the air. And so when Dean said, oh yes, we're on, it lifted my spirit because it gives us a chance, I see, to celebrate what we're about as a university, not only good scholarship, but resilience. Resilience. And so I'm very, very, very happy today to bring greetings on behalf of the campus administration on this occasion. And I also want to apologize for Professor Williams, who is unable to attend, but sends his blessings and his congratulations also. I just want to say two quick things. I know Dr. Kincaid says we're going to keep it, you said tight and sweet, sweet and tight? Yes, I think I heard that. Yes, good objectives, good goals. I want to say two things. One is that Professor Carmel Roofe's lecture focusing on curriculum implementation really speaks to the heart of our university's mission. I think a lot of times we don't think about curriculum really in the way we should, and we don't always give it the pride of place that it should get. But really it is at the heart and soul of a lot of the work we do. And when we bring forth that expression of the work with our students or research or teaching, really at the center there is curriculum. And it's not merely a plan, it's a means through which knowledge is animated, values are transmitted, and future leaders are shaped. In this era of transformation, we talk about AI, we talk about technological change, we talk about digital transformation. This is the year for UWI of digital acceleration. And with all of this and the evolving needs, the scholarship of Professor Roofe reminds us that curriculum implementation is where vision becomes reality and where the true work of teaching and learning is revealed. So we're very, very happy to have this particular theme being a theme for our distinguished lecture here, our inaugural lecture this evening. And the second thing I want to say is that this evening's celebration, this evening's event, invite us to reflect on what it means to be a professor. It is always something, I think, when we have these moments of celebration, we think about the professorship. And indeed, Professor Roofe has distinguished herself. She has drawn attention to her work globally, not only locally and regionally. And in doing so, and in attaining the highest point in the academy in terms of our faculty, attaining that highest point, she's also brought attention to our university as a distinguished leader devoted to inquiry, devoted to truth, devoted to scholarship. Today, colleagues, the role of professor carries even broader expectation than of old, I would say. The professor of today is called to innovate, is called to provide that intellectual leadership, within and beyond the walls of the academy, that public intellectualism, that leadership out there, that inspiring the community, definitely being thought leaders out there. And Professor Roofe steps into this noble tradition at a time when universities like this UWI, this very UWI Mona, must balance long-standing scholarly values with the demands of a rapidly changing world. We have no doubt about it. We are in a very, very, very interesting period in terms of that balancing act. And her work exemplifies this balance, as you'd hear. Finally, her elevation is also a moment for the UWI to reaffirm our regional mission, our commitment to excellence, our belief that scholarship must speak to the needs, to the aspirations, and resilience of our people, particularly now as we rebuild from the profound impact of Hurricane Melissa. Professor Roofe, congratulations. We celebrate you big time. Huh? We celebrate you this evening. We honor your contribution to knowledge. We really honor those who have been around you and behind you and who have supported you. That's very important. Your contribution to the faculty, to the university, and to the region we serve. Warmest congratulations and every best wish for you as you deliver this inaugural professorial lecture. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Tomlin Paul. Dr. Edwards Carr, our Dean, is unavoidably absent. She's currently traveling. However, she's asked me to bring greetings on her behalf. And as I shared before, Carmel, congratulations, and I know that she would want me to share that with you. She's asked me to bring greetings on her behalf, and she's asked me to celebrate and congratulate you. She said, "It is clear that the Faculty of Humanities and Education is proud of your achievements, and it's proud of the achievements of one of our own. You are a child of the soil of the Faculty of Humanities and Education." Carmel has proven herself to be an outstanding academic, an outstanding person, and an outstanding colleague. She has proven herself to be someone who has contributed significantly to the faculty and to the department, at different departments and the School of Education. In her capacity, she currently serves as a deputy dean in her capacity, she currently serves as the director of the School of Education. But you have also served, Carmel, as Deputy Dean of Graduate Studies and Research and Undergraduate Studies. Additionally, you've also seen it important to not only focus on your advancement in the academy, but you have also strived to support and advance those who come behind. So Carmel, for those of you who may not know, was also instrumental in the conceptualization of AGRE, which is the Association of Graduate Students in Education. And what this has demonstrated is that she has a commitment to support and lead. As a professor, you understand that it is not just about accolades for yourself, but you understand, and she understands, that it is about how others are supported. And just to share, just as was shared by the American Association of the Advancement of Curriculum Studies, Sandra Vanderbilt, the president of the American Association for the Advancement of Curriculum Studies, and Todd Allen Price, the former president of the American Association for Curriculum Studies, said, "Carmel is a generous and outstanding academic. She's generous with cross collaborations, sharing ideas between the American Association of Curriculum Studies and her own organizations, as well as the Caribbean Association for the Advancement of Curriculum Studies. And to this end, our scholarly community is enriched. A sincere thank you, Carmel, for the work, your steadfast commitment to curriculum studies, and for making the Association for the Advancement of the American Association for the Advancement of Curriculum Studies a stronger scholarly conference." Colleagues, it's not every day we meet colleagues such as Carmel. She continues to work, she continues to give her all, and for that we are thankful. The Faculty of Humanities and Education is thankful. And as our former director in previous years after COVID, steered a ship during the COVID pandemic and after. Carmel is leading the School of Education during this crisis with the faculty during Hurricane Melissa. For those of you who may not know, many of our students are experiencing quite a bit of difficulty. We've had students who, in order for them to come to class, they have to drive 2 parishes and sit on the side of the road and steal somebody's Starlink or try to get someone's internet kindly. And this shows that at this point, it's a sad reality. But we need someone such as Prof. Roofe to steer the ship. And for that, we are thankful. Carmel, we share you with the world. We see you as our own and we claim you as our own. But we know that you are bigger and far more important. And we see that you have a lot to share. And so the University of the West Indies, the Faculty of Humanities and Education, sees you as an excellent contributor to the Academy. And we are pleased, very pleased. Congratulations on a job well done. I forgot I'm leading. I apologize. Okay, I'm doing too much at this point. At this point, I'm going to invite Dr. Marcia Rainford, the immediate past director of the School of Education, to the podium, following which we're going to then invite our mentors. And the first mentor is going to be Professor Zelin Jennings-Craig.
Thanks, Prof. Kincaid Clark. Colleagues, students, distinguished guests, I won't go into the trouble of identifying all the different categories, but I must recognize, look at who is just coming in, our past dean, Professor Coinberg, and we have Dr. Paul, we have Professor Jennings, and we have, of course, Professor Carmel Roofe in the midst, who we're celebrating this evening. Technology. On behalf of the School of Education, I extend hearty congratulations to our colleague, Professor Carmel Roofe, Professor of Curriculum and Instruction. This distinction is richly deserved and reflects her outstanding scholarship, visionary leadership, and unwavering commitment to the School of Education, the University of the West Indies, and the broader field of education. I am genuinely pleased to be here this evening, not only as retired director of the school, but as someone who has had the privilege of witnessing Professor Roofe's academic journey unfold with grace, determination, and brilliance. When I was asked to present Carmel's case for promotion to the rank of professor, I found it to be a task that was both a joy and a challenge. The challenge, of course, was how to capture the full scope of her accomplishments in research, teaching, and service without leaving anything out. The truth is, Carmel excelled in all 3 areas. You've heard that she's a proud product of the School of Education and a graduate of the University of the West Indies. She earned her PhD in Curriculum Development in 2008 and joined the School of Education in 2015 as lecturer. In just 8 years, she rose to the rank of professor, a testament to the impact of her hard work and dedication. Some may describe Carmel's rise through the academy as rapid, but those of us who know her understand the immense dedication, discipline, and quiet perseverance that have defined her path. Carmel often refers to herself as a late bloomer, and knowing her, I suspect that she'll weave that motive into her lecture this evening. She is calm, focused, principled, a strong advocate for social justice, and once she sets her mind to something, she is not easily swayed. In the area of research, Carmel has averaged more than 2 publications per year, with over 50 scholarly outputs, including 4 books. Her most recent, The Lived Curriculum Experiences, at least I hope I'm right, Carmel, of Jamaican Teachers, Curare and Decolonizing Intentions, published in 2022, is a powerful and timely contribution to the field. Her work in curriculum studies spans theory, policy, and practice, addressing both the public school system and higher education. Her research is organized around 3 major themes: curriculum development, school leadership, and teacher education. Collaboration is a hallmark of her scholarship, and Carmel has led and participated in projects with colleagues from Indonesia, Finland, Sweden, the USA, Australia, Turkey, England, and of course, Jamaica, advancing curriculum scholarship on a global scale. She has also pioneered innovative research methodologies within the School of Education. Notably, she led a project involving 2 academics and 10 postgraduate students in the use of photo voice methodology. This initiative not only trained students and produced conference papers, but we have, as an important outcome, 1 student completing her doctoral studies using this method. Her teaching and academic leadership is outstanding, and her service to the School of Education and wider community extensive. She's deeply passionate about teaching and student mentorship. Carmel's versatility and willingness to support the school in diverse areas such as TVET education is really noteworthy. She has always contributed to the SOE Biennial Conference and the TVET Conference committees, and she is the founding chair of the School of Education's Academic Quality Assurance Curriculum Committee. You've also heard that she revived our Association of Graduate Researchers in Education, which fosters student leadership and scholarship. This led, of course, to a conference of Agri in 2019 and has continued since. She led the transformation of the Emmeline Curriculum Development Program and transformed that to the Emmeline Curriculum and Instruction Program for both face-to-face and online delivery. And that program is one of that graduate program is one that has a lot of students, put it that way. It's the 2nd largest program in the School of Education, that program. And we owe a lot to Carmel for her leadership in that area. And I could go on, but I will stop. This evening, we are eager to hear from Professor Roofe as she takes us inside her research journey and shares the insights that have shaped her work and her vision for the future. Professor Roofe, we salute your achievements, your scholarship, and your service. Heartiest congratulations on this well-earned milestone. We look forward to your lecture.
Colleagues, at this time we're going to begin a section called The Mentors Speak. And Carmel has asked 4 mentors to speak, and they're going to go in this order: Professor Jennings Craig, Professor Paul Miller, Professor Stafford Griffith, and then we're going to be followed by a musical item. Professor Miller and Professor Griffith are going to join us virtually. There's a recorded presentation. So, Professor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. And good evening to everyone here. It's wonderful to see you. I'm very happy to see familiar faces amongst the distinguished guests. Dr. Tomlin Paul. I remember Dr. Paul because we both supervised a student, a PhD student, whose studies spanned medicine and education. So glad to see you, Dr. Paul. Sorry that Dion is not here for us to see her in her role as Dean. Dr. Marcia Rainford, happy to see you in your new state of retirement. And really looking forward to seeing and hearing Professor Stafford Griffiths and Miller. I'm so happy to see my old friend Susan Anderson, and I'm sure I saw Prof. Cook came in. Yes, good to see you all. Well, I am truly honored to speak on this momentous occasion in Carmel's life. Carmel asked me to speak on my role as one of her mentors. I see my role as helping to shape Carmel's academic success and professional development, and mainly in the area of providing academic and research guidance, as she did her PhD thesis. Carmel and I go back some 20 years or more. I was trying to remember when first I met her, but our paths first crossed, maybe it was around 2003 or 4, when she applied to do the graduate program in the School of Education and chose to specialize in curriculum. I was a lecturer in charge of that specialization at the time, and so I had the task of admitting students. She had no problem gaining acceptance because she met all the admission requirements. But what attracted my attention about her application was the fact that she was entering with a first-class degree from UTech. And furthermore, she was teaching in a primary school. I was very impressed with that. And I remember saying, boy, this is fantastic. We need more teachers like her in primary schools. And we also need research on the primary curriculum. Because in those days, it was a revised primary curriculum, which was underpinned by all these concepts related to constructivism, and we hadn't yet learned how teachers were coping with all these new ideas in the school. So I felt we needed that kind of research. So I was very excited about her entry into the program. I'm not sure of the timeline, but it was clearly before the topic of the doctoral thesis had been decided on that I found out that Carmel was working at the Vocational Training and Development Institute, the VTDI. I just happened to meet her by chance one day when I was on my way to the principal's office. And I must admit that at that moment my heart sank. Primary school research gone through the window, I said. Because her field was TVET, and I felt she's now at VTDI. She's going to do something in TVET. Anyway, I was really very happy for her because her mode of dress, her deportment, her air of confidence told me that she was on the move professionally. And one of my roles as a mentor is to support her professional development. And also much of what she was doing at VTDI was applying a lot of the principles and ideas that she was learning in the graduate program at UE. She made excellent progress in the graduate program. She was a hard worker. She thoroughly researched her assignments, was well organized, and in my interactions with her, I felt that she managed work and study and home life very well. I can't recall any time that she sought permission for late submission of any assignment. You know, as her PhD supervisor, she was a real pleasure to work with. She listened and took advice and worked assiduously towards the completion of her thesis. And she did it in a very timely fashion. I think she didn't take more than 4 years at the most in the program to complete, which was really marvelous because I had a student who joined the program the same time as her, and 8 years later I was still battling with her. I was correcting the same chapter over and over again. I didn't have all that sort of problem with Carmel. And maybe I was a little demanding as a supervisor, because I remember one day Carmel came to my office and she said, "What do I have to do to complete this thesis?" She wanted to finish it off and get it out of the way. And really at that time, there really wasn't much to be done. And in no time she was complete. I think you heard she completed in 2008. And do you know what her thesis was? Levels of implementation of the revised primary curriculum in grades 1 to 3. I was so happy supervising that thesis. It makes a difference when the supervisor of the thesis has an interest in the topic. I know because I went through my PhD and I had a supervisor who had no interest in what I was researching at all. Anyway, I was so impressed with Carmel's performance in the curriculum courses as she studied for the PhD that when I needed help with a number of courses and students I had to teach, and I could have part-time assistants, she was my person of choice. Again, this I saw as part of my role as a mentor. I saw her interest in academics life, and I wanted to support her professional development. And I thought experience teaching on a part-time basis at UWI would lead her into career in UWI in the long run. While I was thinking of my role as mentor, something came to mind, which is a conversation I had with Carmel. I think it was while she was doing the PhD. I said to her that she had done all her studies in universities in Jamaica and so far spent her working life in Jamaica. And it would be good if she got exposure to other ideas from people in a different culture, also looking at curriculum too, but she would see different ways of thinking and operating in the field. After all, she was still very young, and perhaps she could be a visiting scholar to a university abroad. And this was all part of her growth as an academic. So I said, I think I mentioned some colleagues who used to be at UWI in the School of Education and went off to work at universities in Australia. So I said, think about it. And she clearly did, because some time later, could have been a couple of years, when I met up with her, she had recently returned from Australia. I believe I don't know if she was there on sabbatical leave. Was it sabbatical leave? Fellowship. And she'd been there for some time, but had to return to Jamaica earlier than expected because of an illness in her family. I remember this occasion because it underscores Carmel's strengths, one of her many strengths, which you've heard already. Her ability to create this international outreach, to reach out to colleagues further afield, not only at home, but further afield. And these colleagues will always want to interact with Carmel because of the sort of person that she is. As a mentor, I tried to maintain a sort of open communication with my mentees. I wanted to be them to see me as very approachable. And with Carmel, this was very easy because, as you see, she has a very pleasing and warm personality, which makes her very easy to relate to. Whenever I think of Carmel, I see this smile. She always strikes me as a very sort of happy person, you know. But this smile and this warmth, it draws her into a friendship. And I think we see the result of that. We've heard of the collaborations that she has established in different parts of the world, as Dr. Rainford went through. And this has certainly helped to strengthen her research and her publications. I recall one year, a group of us in the School of Education. I know Dr. Anderson was there and Professor Cook. We attended the American Educational Research Association, the ARE conference, which at that time was held in Canada. And to our surprise, who should we meet there? Carmel. Now, if you've ever been to these conferences, they send you this big book. It's so huge that it has hundreds of, sessions in different places. And you should really read through and choose the ones that you want to go to beforehand. Of course, I didn't have the time, so when I went there, I was sort of almost turning around in circles, trying to think, where Carmel was different. Carmel was well organized. She knew exactly which sessions she wanted to go to, who she wanted to interact with, and so on. Now, looking back, one thing that I think mentors or graduate students should do, which I don't think I did specifically for Carmel, was to expose her to professional networks, conferences, offer guidance in publishing. But this was something that I had in mind for all graduate students in the school. And while I was director, I discussed the idea initially with a couple of members of staff. And I recall working with Dr. Paulette Ferraria and drafting the terms of reference for the Association of Graduate Researchers in Education, AGRI. I thought AGRI was important because I didn't like to see how we had good master's and PhD theses. And as soon as the students finished, those theses were just left on library shelves, and a lot of them were just not interested in going back to it, and certainly not doing any writing. So the idea was that AGRI would help them with that process of, taking material from the thesis and writing it up, and sharing with education, not only in Jamaica, but in the rest of the world, so that they could see how their research had contributed to the advancement of their field. So AGRI started off with very humble beginnings, but since I left the school, I'm delighted to see that under the leadership of Carmel, AGRI has grown from strength to strength, and you heard Dr. Marcy Rainford speak about that. So I want to end by saying, Carmel, that your rise from a primary school teacher to a professor of curriculum studies and now director of the School of Education has been phenomenal. You are a phenomenal woman. And I am proud to have been one of the mentors who helped you on your educational journey. And as you chart your path into the future, as always, I wish you well. Thank you.
Honored guest, Professor Carmel Roofe, it is my pleasure to be able to participate in this inaugural professorial lecture. First, I want to say congratulations to you, Professor Carmel Roofe, on your appointment as Professor of Curriculum Studies and also on this your inaugural professorial lecture. Carmel, I am really, really proud of you and of what you have achieved. I know how hard you work, and you are really well deserving of this title and status. I have been your mentor for a number of years, and it has been a pleasure working with you since 2012. Being your mentor was easy because you wanted to learn, to grow, and to achieve. And these are important personal and professional qualities for mentees. I know how much you have mentored other people and have passed on what you have learned so that you can invest in the community, in this academic community. Today is not my day, though. Today is your day, Carmel. Today is your day when you shine, when you relax, and you take it all in. That this girl from Bartons has become a professor at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Jamaica, where this girl from Bartons has done her family proud. And I'm sure Mama and Glenn and all your families, your sisters and your nieces and nephews and everyone there must be so proud of you. And of course, KB, your daughter. So, from Bartons to UWI and the world, Professor Carmel Roofe, well done. One love. Congratulations. Proud of you.
Good evening to you all, esteemed colleagues, friends, and family of Professor Carmel Roofe. I am Stafford Griffith, a Professor Emeritus of the University of the West Indies. It is a great honor and privilege to share this short message with you on this momentous occasion of the inaugural professorial lecture of Professor Carmel Roofe. This evening is special for me, and I am sorry that I could not be there in person, but I want to convey to Professor Carmel Roofe, nevertheless, my delight at being able to say a few words, even through this medium, on her inaugural lecture as Professor of Curriculum Studies. I am particularly excited about this evening's professorial lecture since, immodest though it may seem, I believe that I can claim some role in the meteoric rise of this outstanding scholar who delivers her inaugural professorial lecture this evening. Professor Roofe's rapid elevation in the academic community is not at all surprising to me. From the beginning of her tenure at the School of Education, approximately 10 years ago, I was struck by her commitment to excellence in research and her humility in putting her creative mind to work in a wide range of professional pursuits in the School of Education. My first contact with Professor Roofe was in my role as director of the School of Education in the effort of the Mona campus to recruit her to a curriculum post in the School of Education. She was coming from another university where she was already a senior lecturer. But given our challenging standards at the University of the West Indies, we could not offer her a post at that level and instead offered her a post as lecturer. I recognized her disappointment and concern, but given my review of her background and my discussions with her, I was confident that she could rise quickly to higher levels of academic standing in the University of the West Indies community, and I therefore encouraged her to take the job as lecturer and take on the challenge of working towards her advancement in the University of the West Indies system. And I kept tabs on her to see how she was progressing in the system and provided encouragement and opportunities where I could to support her further growth and development. I did similarly for other staff, especially those who were recruited during my tenure as director of the School of Education. But today is Professor Roofe's special day. 2 years after she had joined the staff of the School of Education, I was pleased to recommend her for elevation to senior lecturer. It was with great pride that I called attention to her accomplishments over the 2-year period, her outstanding publication record, her teaching excellence, her supervision of graduate research, her professional and administrative service to the School of Education, and her notable public service. Today, I celebrate her elevation in the academic community to the rank of professor. As I do so, I also celebrate her recent appointment as director of the Mona School of Education, a position I held when she was recruited to serve as a member of that school's academic staff. Professor Roofe, you have been accorded a well-deserved elevation in the academic community. I look forward to the continued impact you are bound to make in charting new frontiers of thought and practice in the field of curriculum studies nationally, regionally, and in the global community. I look forward to the opportunity to listen either through live streaming or through a recording your presentation of what will, no doubt, be an erudite inaugural professorial lecture. Again, congratulations, Professor Roofe, on your outstanding accomplishment.
Colleagues, the mentors spoke and we all agree. A job well done. I just want to highlight and bring the greetings to Professor Silva Coimberg, our former dean in the Faculty of Humanities and Education. So at this time, we're going to take a little break and we're going to hear just a bit of music, beautiful melodies, and we're going to ask Ms. Corinne Fraser to join us as she entertains us.
Good evening, everyone. As requested by the professor herself, I did it my way. And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friends, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do and saw it through without exemption. I've planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway, and much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew. But through it all, when there was dawn, I did up and spit out. I faced it all, endorsed it all, and did it my way. I've loved, I've laughed and cried, I've had my fill, my share of losing, and now as tears subside, I find it all so amusing to think I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way. Oh no, not me. I did it my way. For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not to say the things he truly feels, and the words of what on this the record shows. I took the blows and did it my way. Yes, I did it my way.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. When I grow up, I want to be like Carmel Roofe. But growth is not about age or size. It's about refusing to stop moving forward. And Carmel Roofe has been moving forward all her life. Carmel's story began in Barton's, Bamboo Ridge, in the parish of St. Catherine. She moved there forward by foot, walking for miles to get transportation to get the bus. She moved forward by washing at the river and carrying water on her head on her way home. And she moved forward at nights when she had her homework to be done, after the water was carried and after the chores were done. And she never stopped moving. She built a remarkable academic career rooted in curriculum studies and educational leadership. She earned her degree at Shortwood Teachers College in 1995. Graduated, as you heard, with first-class honors from the University of Technology in 2000. She earned her MPhil in 2005 and her PhD in 2008 from the University of the West Indies, Mona. She then authored a book, and then another, and then another, and then another. She edited 2 more, with all with major publishing houses, such as Routledge and Palgrave Macmillan. She edited 5 journal volumes, contributed to more than 20 book chapters, and published over 37 peer-reviewed articles. She has under her belt more than 90 conference papers and invited presentations. And they were delivered, as you would have heard from Dr. Rainford, across Jamaica, Turkey, Malta, Canada, the United Arab Emirates, England, Indonesia, Spain, Sweden, Australia, and the United States of America. In fact, her research and work has traveled further than most of us ever will. She has supervised to completion 29 master's and PhD students and has been an internal and second examiner to some 20 others, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level. In 2018, the University of the West Indies recognized her distinguished performance and awarded her with the Distinguished Teaching Prize. She thought, this is lovely. And they gave it to her again in 2022, 4 years later. She has received the Critics' Choice Book Award in 2023, and that's for the Palgrave publication, and the Principal Research Award for the Most Outstanding Researcher in 2024. When the world calls, Carmel answers. The World Bank called. The governments of Belize, St. Lucia, and Jamaica called. Universities in England and Australia called. The American Association for the Advancement of Curriculum Studies said, we need someone to chair our task force on internationalization. They chose her. She then co-founded the Caribbean affiliate of that association and became its president. Her colleagues describe her as combining scholarly excellence with rigor and with a bold, socially driven agenda that advances education in Jamaica and beyond. But Carmel will tell you that what truly drives her is her faith in God and a personal desire to succeed at anything she does. When she's not consulting with the World Bank, or writing books that win international awards, or supervising postgraduate students, or chairing international task forces, or presenting at conferences, she's sightseeing. She's enjoying nature, spending time with her daughter, or riding roller coasters. Now, this seems fitting. After all, she has done the work, and she is at the point where she can throw her hands up and enjoy the ride down. Growth, Carmel has shown us, is not a destination. It is not about arriving. It's about the endless forward motion from Bamboo Ridge to Shortwood, from Shortwood to UE, from teacher to professor, from local classrooms to international stages, from carrying water to carrying the torch for educational transformation across the Caribbean. So yes, when I grow up, I want to be like Carmel Roofe. I want her determination. I want her faith. I want her refusal not to let anything, not distance, not difficulty, not anyone's limited expectations of her, stop her from moving forward. I want to remember that growth never ends, that the journey never really stops, and that the same strength that it takes to carry water on your head for miles is the same strength that carries ideas across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming one of the Caribbean's leading curriculum scholars, a teacher whose faith has kept her grounded, a lady who moves forward in grace, perseverance, and brilliance, a woman whose story reminds us that we should keep growing, an icon who has earned every step of that journey, Professor Carmel Roofe.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's really good to sit and listen to people talk about you. Most of the persons who know me know that I really do not like to talk about myself. But colleagues, friends, family, everyone, a pleasant good evening to you. Good evening to those online and those who are here in the audience in N1. And I will stand on the protocol that was laid out earlier because I've tried to cut this lecture very short, but I'm going to tell you it's long. So there are some Jamaican proverbs I would like to use to describe the ways I've approached my academic journey. They represent how my career has evolved from being a high school teacher, prof, not primary, to being a professor of curriculum studies. And these proverbs are, 1 cocoa, full basket. Every mickle, make a muckle. Patient man. And if you don't know what those mean, ask your neighbor, or ask your neighbor to ask your neighbor. Added to these sayings is a song presented by Mrs. Fraser, who I met in December 2015 when I joined the staff of the School of Education. The theme of the song, I Did It My Way, is a reflection of how God has guided me to ignore the noise and do what He desires me to do, though sometimes I've been very stubborn. I say this because on this journey, I usually end up in spaces alone, by myself, locally and internationally, because of the ways in which I look at curriculum. I would also have met several persons on this journey who have tried to define me and to define my work and who I am, but somehow I would press on to follow God's leading and accept the outcomes, whatever they may be. So I stand here this evening as a testament of the rewards of perseverance, academic and emotional resilience, ambition my way, and a testament of God's grace. The lecture, titled Beyond Policy, Centering Curriculum Implementation Leadership, explores curriculum implementation leadership as a transformative praxis between vision and reality within Jamaica's education system. The lecture focuses on curriculum implementation at the levels below tertiary education. And so this evening I know that we have a wide audience, persons from the field of academics, others who are researchers, persons who are just interested in the idea of what the lecture is about, others from faith-based organizations, or people who are really educators and parents in this work. But I ask you that as I share this evening, you think about and listen to and see how the ideas I'm sharing, though they are about early childhood, primary, and secondary education curriculum, see how the ideas could be applied to your area. My aim in doing the work that I do is to try and find solutions that are usually contextually grounded. And so this evening, this lecture, I hope will achieve these three objectives, where I'm trying to set the context for what I'm about to talk about by explaining what and how I look at curriculum and look at curriculum implementation. I would also try to provide a very brief historical curriculum implementation analysis of major national formal curriculum reforms from 1970s to the 2000s. And then I will present to you curriculum implementation leadership as what I'm calling a forward futuristic approach to effectively implementing curriculum reform ideas. So I start with the concept of trying to understand curriculum. Several scholars have talked about the fact that curriculum is socially constructed. It is the point of connection between society, institutional policies, strategies, and experiences. And as such, in 2015, UNESCO argues that curriculum may serve to foster social inclusion or social exclusion. Because the term is socially constructed, it means different things to different people, as different people try to find solutions to varying educational problems. And authors such as Roofe, Aoki, Pienaar, and Smith talk about this. I will share three broad groupings for which these meanings are derived. Curriculum can be seen as content, which we often refer to as a body of knowledge to be studied, or subjects as we refer to them. It can be seen as a process where focus is on the how, the when, the where, and the why of interaction between individuals, context, and content. It therefore places value on all outcomes instead of a single product. We also see curriculum as praxis, where emphasis is placed on cause and effect, essentially focusing on what caused the interactions or the experiences or the results to occur in the way they have occurred. And still for others, curriculum is seen as product, where focus is really just on the outcomes. Outcomes of subjects, outcomes of syllabus, etc. There is also another way in which persons look at curriculum, and they refer to what we call forms of curriculum. And so forms of curriculum simply mean that there are different ways in which curriculum as content, curriculum as product, curriculum as process, curriculum as praxis can be organized. And some of you may be familiar with some of these terms. So on the slide, I think I skipped a slide earlier, but on the slide, I present to you some of the different forms of curriculum, where we talk about curriculum as the formal curriculum, which is the official curriculum, the prescribed curriculum, the one that the Ministry of Education is coming to look at you to ensure that you're doing what is you're supposed to be doing. We also have the informal curriculum, and that takes into consideration the values from family, from community, the attitudes, and so on. And these are usually designed to support the formal curriculum. We also have what is referred to as the enacted curriculum, because sometimes we have the structured, formal written curriculum, but half of it is not done. And so the enacted talks about and takes into consideration what is actually carried out on a day-to-day basis. And then we also have the hidden curriculum, which means the things that nobody really set out to do or to teach, but they just happen as a result of interactions. So later on, we have had a group of persons who refer to what is known as the reconceptualization of curriculum, or the field of curriculum studies. And they now talk about the lived curriculum, which is really about the narratives and the reconstruction and construction of how people live and act and operate in a particular place. So consequently, how we conceptualize curriculum will influence what we do and how we do curriculum implementation. Linked to the definition and the forms of curriculum, we have what is referred to as curriculum and context. So there is no conversation about curriculum without talking about context. And this is simply because curriculum is socially constructed. So since curriculum is socially constructed and is defined in different ways by different people, it means that context is critical to any conversation about curriculum. Scholars such as those in anthropology have noted that context remains a powerful adjudicator of curriculum, meaning that situational differences will affect the different forms of curriculum. For example, the formal curriculum context will determine what subjects are emphasized, the cause and effect of the formal curriculum, what results as the product. If we take, for example, the informal curriculum, context will dictate what activities are emphasized, the hours when they can be held, and what values and attitudes are deemed important. And I could go on and on. So when we say we want to change or reform the curriculum, we must first decide what understanding we are taking to this and what we are seeking to change. Because as you see and as we know, subjects and exams are only just one component, a small dimension of the concept of curriculum. And I mention subjects and exams because in our context, we tend to focus on curriculum really as the product and content, and therefore it limits the processes and it limits the praxis, which is the cause and effect, what caused those results to happen in the way they have happened. So I turn to this other concept that is important. Before I turn to that concept, this slide on the screen for those persons who are interested in perhaps engaging at a deeper level with what curriculum is and the different ways in which it is conceptualized, you can check out this book. So I'm turning to the concept of curriculum implementation. And when we talk about curriculum implementation, we're looking at the use of the form of curriculum developed, taking into consideration the content, the product, the process, and praxis. It usually involves three main phases: initiation, implementation, and monitoring, or some authors refer to it as maintenance. Later, I will come back to this as I try to explain curriculum implementation leadership. This process called curriculum implementation is dynamic because curriculum is socially constructed. It involves processes and procedures that are linked to politics, culture, history, and the social dynamics in a place. And our own colleague, Professor Cook, talks about the politics connected to this as teachers work and try to implement curriculum. Thus, the implementation of new curriculum ideas is messy. And it doesn't mean that this is a bad thing. And our own Professor Jennings talk about the nonlinear nature and messiness of curriculum. It just means that it is dependent on human interactions that are unpredictable, largely unpredictable because these interactions regarding implementation will communicate value of people, value of place and things, and usually involves the process of transition which occurs in different phases and in different stages. So indulge me briefly as I try to share some examples of the nature of curriculum implementation in its messiness or in its nonlinear nature. To this end, I offer a brief historical analysis of curriculum implementation efforts within Jamaica, and again, I will focus mainly on the early childhood, primary, and secondary levels. And these ideas that I will share with you are taken from work that I would have done between 2014 to 2025, and also drawing on ideas from other scholars who would have done similar work. So I start with the period of the 1970s. And as I talk about the 1970s to the 1980s, I think about the fact that within the audience, you may have some persons who are even too young to read about these ideas. And many of us are probably too young to remember them, which means that there must be a group in here who would have lived these experiences, right? So the 1970s to 80s, I look at the early childhood education curriculum implementation. The first officially written early childhood curriculum for 4 to 6-year-olds was developed and implemented in 1973. The curriculum was developed to help paraprofessional basic school teachers who were said to lack deep knowledge of child development and education practices. In 1979, this is 6 years after the early childhood curriculum was implemented, the implementation data from the Ministry of Education found several limitations with it, including its heavy emphasis on subjects. So by 1983, a new curriculum, the readiness curriculum for 4 and 5-year-olds was implemented. And by 1995, we had McDonald doing a study looking at what was happening with this curriculum that was implemented. And what did they find? What did McDonald find? It found that teachers had inadequate training, teachers were not using the pedagogical practices that they were expected to use, there was inadequate integration across subjects and lack of focus on developmental areas outside of cognitive development. Let's look at the primary level. 2 themes dominated the primary curriculum reform between the 1970s and 1980s. Those 2 themes, the one was Foundations of Self-Reliance, which focused at grades 1 to 3, and Foundations of Self-Development at grades 4 to 6. And for those people who are politically inclined in here, you would know that those 2 themes aligned with the thrust of the government at the time. In particular, which government? There you go, right? So the implementation data through studies by Bailey et al. And Emil 2004 revealed the following, as you can see on the slide. Approximately 50% of students reading below the grade level. It was found that the curriculum was overloaded with content, incoherent, and not able to achieve its aims. And though the curriculum was to be based on an integrated approach to teaching and learning, lessons were delivered using the subject-based approach to teaching. I want to turn to what was happening with secondary education at that time, 1970s to 80s. And for the curriculum at the secondary level during the 1970s to the 1980s, it reflected a combination of the grammar type and technical and vocational subjects. So reforms during this period saw different types of secondary school with different types of curricula. For the secondary level, Petgrave 2011 indicated that though this era saw the expansion of secondary education and changes to curricula to create a more egalitarian society, there was difficulty in transforming the curricula of elite secondary schools and the classist mentality. Thus, the changes in this era did not impact the majority of the local black poor in the way they had been envisioned. Let's turn to the 1990s. And the 1990s would have seen extensive curriculum reform. For early childhood, this period gave birth to the Jamaican Early Childhood Curriculum Guide for children birth to 5 years, with a focus on the whole development of the child. And we have authors such as Sam Vaughan and McDonald who would have done some work on this. The implementation data revealed that improvement was needed in the teaching, in the training and preparation of individuals to work with the curriculum. There was lack of teaching and learning resources to support classroom activities, and there was the need for greater parental involvement to support students. Davies in 2005, of blessed memory, reported that children continued to enter the first grade of primary school without being fully prepared, and that the quality of care provided at this level was still a concern. 1990s, for the primary level, this ushered in a new curriculum known as the revised primary curriculum. And you would have heard Prof. Jennings talk about me doing my thesis on that. So within this period, you had curriculum-based assessment, and that was introduced to support the new curriculum. This was introduced through a national assessment program. Research conducted by the Planning Institute of Jamaica in 2009, the Ministry of Education in 2012, and some work that I did in 2014 revealed readiness levels of students entering grade 1 of primary schools was low, especially for students from poor backgrounds. The data also indicated learning resources to support the curriculum were inadequate. There was content overload. Teachers were inadequately prepared to deliver the curriculum. The curriculum-based examination placed students with low ability levels at a disadvantage. For the secondary level, in 1993, we had the reform of secondary education, the ROSE program, and this was launched as a major overhaul of the secondary education curriculum to create what is referred to as the common curriculum for students at grades 7 to 9 in all types of secondary schools. So while the ROSE curriculum was perceived as an effective tool to achieve the objectives of equity, quality, and productivity by the Ministry of Education, several challenges hindered its success. For instance, by 1997, the Ministry of Education, by 1997, Evans and the Ministry of Education in 2016 indicated that though the curriculum utilized an integrative approach and was framed to be student-centered, instruction was carried out using teacher-centered strategies to meet assessment targets. The implementation data also indicated that focus was on content retention instead of the development of transferable skills. And because we're talking about the secondary level, I want to also highlight this particular findings by Evans to bring into focus how histories and cultures affect curriculum implementation. In examining the implementation of the ROSE curricula in 3 types of secondary schools, Evans noted that the strongest resistance to successful implementation came from teachers in the traditional high schools because they saw the innovation as eroding their social status and prestige as grammar school. And so I'm going to close this by quickly looking at the period of the 2000s. And I'm doing this to kind of give us a sense of why I'm focusing on curriculum implementation leadership. During the period of the 2000s, which is still ongoing, the Early Childhood Commission was established to give special attention to the needs of early childhood development and care. Curriculum was developed and implemented between 2009 and 2010, and this guided the sector. In 2021, the Patterson report indicated that 80% of early childhood institutions were using the approved curriculum for early childhood students. It also indicated that 1/3 of the early childhood institutions included developmentally appropriate activities for students whose developmental progress was slower than others and had a program that focused on all domains of development. Another aspect of the data indicated 11% of the institutions had adequate numbers of resources for play. And for those of us who know about early childhood, like Professor Kincaid Clark, play is very important. And so the Commission recommended urgent attention to the implementation of some of the recommendations from the 2004 Task Force report that were not implemented. And I think we have some of that work going on now. For primary and secondary education during the 2000s, we had a merger. The period of the 2000s ushered in a shared vision for education by both political parties on the island through the 2004 Task Force. This period ushered in a seamless revision between primary and secondary education. So by September 2016, we had the National Standards Curriculum that was implemented. And it was implemented as a response to the need to prepare students for the 21st century global environment, improve equality, offer quality education, and make use of advances in technology. And we have to big up Jamaica because now we have the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and for SDG 4 it talks about quality education, and Jamaica was ahead of this, before the establishment of that. The NSC was implemented in grades 1 to 6 of primary and preparatory schools and grades 7 to 9 of all types of secondary schools in Jamaica, and it's still in use. Given concerns about students' underperformance, the NSC also caters to students through different learning pathways, known as the Alternative Pathway to Secondary Education Program, or as some teachers call it, the APSI, or the APS, right? The APS curriculum was developed to offer a differentiated instructional program to students. And Nichols, Spencer, and myself would have done some work on this in 2023 that is published. But notwithstanding these admirable changes, one of the things that I've noted in looking at the data, especially for the 2000s and from the 1970s coming up, most of what happens at the upper level segment of secondary schooling is largely left up to examination bodies. And so that's one of the things I've noticed is a gap, and perhaps developers of curriculum need to look into that. So what is the implementation data saying to us? I hope we all can see that on the slide. The data is saying to us thus far that the NSC, the National Standards Curriculum, is a good initiative as it relates to student-centered approaches, subject integration, differentiation, ICT integration, critical thinking, and helping students learn how to address issues in contemporary society. And if you have been paying attention and listening, you are seeing some of the same things coming through the implementation data. The data is also saying for primary and secondary now that there's need for better integration of ICT, inadequate training to implement, lack of adequate resources to support implementation of the new ideas, lack of administrative support for implementation in schools. The authors you are seeing on the screen, Scott 2020, Bennett 2020, Green Mitchell 2022, Nichols, Spencer, and Roofe 2023. Except for Roofe, all these other authors are graduates of the Curriculum and Instruction Program. And this is something I'm really very proud of. Some of them are in the room and some are online, right? And so the Pattison report has also highlighted that there is a great need for an evaluation of the National Standards Curriculum. And I'm seeing Professor Taylor in the room, who I worked with when we were looking at this. So I want to close this brief historical glance by drawing on one of the articles I published in 2019, which focused on an analysis of teachers and school leaders' experiences regarding what happens when curriculum policy initiatives meet the diverse context of schools. In that study, drawing on quantitative and qualitative data, the findings showed that a combination of in-school and out-of-school factors affected successful implementation of curriculum policies. From this, the study concluded that curriculum policy implementation in Jamaican primary schools should include, as a priority, adequate contextualized training of teachers and principals to ensure that skill sets match policy intentions, school community partnerships are formed to help fund parental support opportunities, and an increase in material resources is allocated to schools where their constituents fall into the lower socioeconomic stratum. And this really aligns with some of the data that we would have looked at earlier. I want to add to the Orlando Pattison report from 2021, which indicates that we need to pay attention to the dual education system that exists in Jamaica. It was expressed by the Task Force on Educational Reform in 2004. 2004. So both reports noted that this system has functioned as the most powerful gatekeeper of the status quo and affect how and what of curriculum is implemented. For instance, depending on the type of school, some schools struggle to support students and respond successfully to curriculum implementation ideals. And Lopez and myself would have written some work on that as well. So in wrestling with the curriculum implementation analysis, I'm putting forward that curriculum implementation is a process. And this process must focus on what I refer to as 3 key P's: people, process, and place. People, the who, and who is being affected. The who, meaning who needs to benefit from the implementation and who the implementation will affect. The processes will take into consideration the procedures, the systems that are needed to put in place to support the implementation. And place takes into consideration the context, the specific institution, the geographical location, the community, etc. Focusing on people, place, and process as curriculum is being implemented allows for responsive, contextual, and evidence-based implementation that considers interdependent relationships in the curriculum implementation process. So consequently, I want to also ask you to journey with me as I offer the other idea, which is what the lecture largely wants to put forward: curriculum implementation leadership. So in addition to people, process, and place, I'm saying that curriculum implementation must focus on implementation leadership. So journey with me as we look at what curriculum implementation leadership is about. And as I talk about this, I will also incorporate the 3 P's. So if you search the literature, you will not find much information on curriculum implementation leadership. The closest thing you will find is curriculum leadership. And I recall when I was wrestling with the implementation data, because I've been doing this work over a number of years, I recall asking one of my graduate students to do an annotated bibliography looking at curriculum implementation leadership. And she came back and said, "Doc, you're sure this is what you want and not curriculum leadership?" Because she was not finding the information. I then moved on to another 2 graduate students and asked them to do another search. And the same thing came back. I could not find literature focusing on curriculum implementation leadership. So I want you to journey with me, because it's not just curriculum implementation. I'm talking about curriculum implementation leadership, right? So I realized from that time that these ideas, I needed to tease them out for myself and develop on these ideas. So these are tinkerings. These are ideas that I've wrestled with, continue to argue about, and I think I see my next set of work focusing on testing some of this actually in the field. So bear with me as I go through. So curriculum implementation leadership is defined as the strategic approaches utilized and the influencing behaviors exhibited to lead the use. And if you remember that implementation is about the use. So to lead the use or the implementation of curriculum. Underlying this definition is the assumption that the activities and behavior of the leader or leaders of the implementation of the curriculum will influence the implementation of the curriculum. So if we are looking at curriculum implementation leadership within the context of the National Standards curriculum or the alternative pathway to secondary education curriculum, the questions to ask are: what are the strategic approaches being used by those who are leading the implementation of the different components of the NSC or the apps? And 2, what are the influencing behaviors being exhibited to lead the use of these curriculum components? For curriculum implementation leadership to be successful, The leaders of the implementation must focus their attention on the specific principles and practices of the curriculum to be implemented and the human interaction behaviors that these activities engender. And I know I may have some persons in the room who do not like to pluralize behavior, but in this context, it's behaviors, right, we're looking at. So struggle with me, right? Others of us are fine with it, but I know there are some persons who are not fine with it. So for curriculum implementation leadership to be successful, the leader of the implementation must focus their attention on, as I said, the specific principles and practices of the curriculum. This concept of curriculum implementation leadership is grounded in the area of implementation science, because that's the only area I could find some respite or rescue. The people who are in the healthcare field or the health sciences, that's the closest thing that I could find to help me understand these ideas that I was developing surrounding curriculum implementation leadership. With implementation science, the focus is on evidence-led research or data that focuses on the factors that influence the use of an intervention and factors that sustain the use of that intervention. Consequently, when applied to the idea of curriculum interventions and leadership for those interventions, the focus is on evidence that help us understand the factors or the strategic approaches that influence the use of the curriculum intervention and the influencing behaviors needed to improve and sustain effective use of the curriculum intervention. Curriculum implementation leadership must therefore be steeped in research or data to drive daily routine practice in using the curriculum intervention or the curriculum reform idea or implementing the curriculum change. And I want to say it's important for us to know that when I talk about curriculum implementation leadership, this is not synonymous to being the head of an organization or being the principal or being the head of department or being the education officer. Curriculum implementation leadership is about those who are assigned leadership responsibilities for carrying out specific actions required for leading curriculum implementation, whether at the macro, meso, or micro levels. While the head of the organization or institution has a role to play in successful implementation, we need to understand the separation of the roles, even if they are being carried out by the same person. So curriculum implementation leadership requires specific leadership skills associated with the curriculum being implemented. Skills that we refer to as domain-specific leadership skills, and you'll see that on the slide. Domain-specific leadership is thus a combination of influencing behaviors and knowledge of the areas or components of the curriculum being implemented. In other words, knowledge of what is necessary to understand, influence, and use the curriculum. This then is a combination of self-knowledge, curriculum knowledge, and leadership knowledge. And I want to say the word knowledge is being used here loosely, but it's being used to refer to principles, practices, values, attitudes, etc. The following are therefore 4 domains of this implementation leadership of which I speak. The first domain is referred to as proactive leadership. And proactive leadership is about removing obstacles to implementation of the new curriculum idea. The second domain-specific leadership is supportive leadership, which focuses on recognizing, showing support, and appreciating the efforts of the implementer in learning and using the new curriculum idea. The third area, or the third domain-specific leadership is knowledgeable leadership. And knowledgeable leadership focuses on knowing about and communicating benefits of the new curriculum idea. The fourth domain is perseverant leadership. And this is about persisting through challenges in implementing the new curriculum idea. So to collect the relevant data on the domain-specific influencing approaches and behaviors, an implementation leadership scale is used. The implementation leadership scale assesses the degree to which an implementation leader is proactive, knowledgeable, supportive, and perseverant in regard to evidence-based practice of implementation of the curriculum idea. Or in the field of curriculum, we talk about the curriculum innovation. Right, Prof. Jennings? So there is extensive research on implementation leadership in the field of healthcare to improve quality of care and patient outcomes in the health sector. And I see some health science people in the room as well. For us in education, we need to examine this area of implementation leadership because I think it holds much promise for improving what we now have in the education sector as curriculum implementation deficiency. And the Patterson report talks about that, and that's the most recent report on our entire education system. So for us in education, we often assume that generic skills of leadership are sufficient for curriculum implementation. But I'm arguing that in the same way implementation leadership is used as a basis for improving quality of care and patient outcomes in the health sector, and Clifford and Aaron's talk quite a bit about that. It can be used for improving the quality of the curriculum interventions and their outcomes in education. In this approach, the focus is on unit-level implementation, which allows for increased attention on contextual factors that impede effective implementation. And if you were paying attention from the 1970s to the 2000s, you would have seen some of those. In using the scale, that's the implementation leadership scale, focus is placed on the implementation leader, that is the curriculum implementation leader, by those being led, those referred to as the staff, and by the leader reflecting on self. So data is being collected two ways. So thus there are two versions of the scale, one for staff to report on the implementation leader and one for the implementation leader to report on self. The data collected on the strategic approaches demonstrated and the influencing behaviors exhibited can then be used to provide support where necessary, such as to influence the development of influencing behaviors or enhance implementation leadership behaviors. I want to just quickly share perhaps what the scale looks like and to say what I've done so far is really to adapt the scale that was put forward by Gifford 2017 et al. So let's look at proactive leadership. Proactive leadership, if the staff is rating the implementation leader, the scale says, please indicate the extent to which you agree with each statement. And this is on a scale of 1 to 4. And 0 means not at all, 1 slight extent, 2 moderate extent, 3 great extent, 4 very great extent. And I want to note that it's not the person you're rating, but you're looking at the demonstrated behaviors or the strategic approaches. So in this instance, if you're looking at proactive leadership, you will be focusing on whether or not the supervisor has developed a plan to facilitate implementation of the new curriculum. Now, if you're looking at a specific curriculum, it means that you would have broken down that particular curriculum into the components that make up that innovation. Not hearing? Second, another question would be to remove obstacles to the implementation of the new curriculum. If you are looking at whether the leader of the implementation is proactive, you would be looking at, as that leader removed obstacles to the implementation of the new curriculum. And then thirdly, has that leader established clear standards for the implementation of the new curriculum? So you're rating unit level specific behaviors and approaches. If we're looking at it from the perspective of the leader rating self, then this is the other side of the proactive leadership. The leader, the implementation leader, would then be asking questions such as, I have developed a plan to facilitate implementation of the new curriculum. So you're questioning yourself and rating yourself. Have I removed obstacles to the implementation of the new curriculum? I notice I is used there so that you're personalizing it. Have I established clear standards for the implementation of the new curriculum, etc.? So essentially, it's an accountable mechanism for persons who are expected to be implementing these new ideas. And we want to move to that because we're not short on developing curriculum. All of the curricula so far over the years have been touted as excellent. Other countries want to adapt them, to use them, etc. But what continues to haunt us is the idea of implementing these ideas to ensure that the outcomes are really what we expect. So to develop the domain-specific implementation leadership behavior for each of the domains, it would be crucial to identify the unit-level components. I want to say that if we move towards using a scale such as this, it would then help us to determine what are the specific demonstrated approaches we want to see, and what are the demonstrated behaviors we want to see, and what are the demonstrated approaches that are supporting the implementation, and what are the ones that are not supporting the implementation of the ideas. And I think this move is crucial because while there is research that talks about factors that lead to successful curriculum implementation, the implementation leadership scale differs in that it provides the basis for unique and specific measures associated with leading implementation that other research have not provided. Our own Professor Jennings-Craig has written about factors that affect implementation leadership. Fullan, 2008, any book you pick up, you'll find him. Ornstein and Honkins, 2016, and so on, and some of my work. But the ILS really differs in the approach that it provides. So therefore, using this scale in collaboration with what we know as generic factors that support successful implementation will accrue benefits for turning the spotlight on curriculum-specific implementation deficiency. I am therefore suggesting that those being asked to lead curriculum implementation must possess certain key transformative curriculum implementation leadership skills. They must be knowledgeable about curriculum implementation stages and models. So you don't just pick up anybody and say, implement this, offer some guidance. They must also be knowledgeable about implementation, leadership, and practices. They must be knowledgeable about research on previously implemented curricula. They must also possess basic research skills to collect and use the evidence. And they must also possess intimate knowledge of the people, the place, and the orality of the specific context in which the new curriculum is being implemented. I want to zone in a little bit on orality, because I talk about this in some other work that I do, and as I talk about people being an important focus area in implementation leadership, I want to just spend a few minutes to talk about orality in terms of how I conceptualize it, as I see Professor Cohenberg and Dr. Parkinson as linguists in here, right? As an oral society, Jamaica is a strongly oral society, and this is why I want to focus on this a little bit. As an oral society, orality sits central to an understanding of the lived curriculum. And orality is about reliance on what is spoken rather than what is written when communicating with individuals about implementation of curriculum. Within the lived curriculum, verbal transmissions serve as oral records of what is valued, what is just, what is unique, and what is remembered in a particular context. And I've cited Cooper, 1994, who talks about this. In some of my work, I use the concept of Caribbean orality, which is about giving attention to the everyday knowledge, language, actions, and the Caribbean situated context within which the curriculum is being implemented. Being open to an understanding of the verbal records within and across geographical locations and school types will allow for a more collaborative learning approach among stakeholders in implementing new curriculum ideas. And as I say this, I remember when I was doing a journal article on Caribbean orality, I wrote to Dr. Ferguson to ask for his insight on something that I has written. So thank you, Joseph. It will also allow for us to give attention to indigenous ways of knowing and doing. In other words, focusing on orality will lead to the acceptance of alternative ways of functioning other than preconceived and predetermined theories and practices during the implementation of new curriculum ideas. For example, the orality will differ among non-traditional high schools based on where they are located, resources available, and who attends. It will differ between traditional and non-traditional high schools and among traditional high schools themselves. Orality will reveal answers about the experiences of people in a place, the gatekeepers and the guardians of the wisdom in the specific context. These issues lead to extreme differences in the school system and cause one type of school to fail and the other to succeed, even when they implement the same curriculum reform ideas. Hence, curriculum implementation leadership underpinned by orality calls education stakeholders to move away from a one-size-fits-all approach in implementing curriculum reform ideas to implementing curriculum reform ideas using situational adaptation, given the orality and the lived experience of the people in the context. These issues, colleagues, friends, and families, are complex, and therefore curriculum implementation leadership is an ongoing process and not an event nor a one-shot activity. It will take time to uncover what influencing behaviors are necessary for each stage of the curriculum implementation process. So earlier I mentioned curriculum implementation occurring in 3 stages, or some scholars talk about it as 3 phases of curriculum implementation: initiation, implementation, and monitoring. Given the implementation leadership thrust, I have added another phase called pre-preparation for curriculum implementation. So instead of 3 phases to curriculum implementation, I talk about 4 phases to make explicit the necessary preparatory work that is needed if we are to collect the relevant contextual data to guide curriculum implementation. I have added the pre-preparation phase, and I will explain this phase because it feeds into the other 3 phases, and I won't go into the other 3 phases in this lecture. That's probably another lecture. Pre-preparation for curriculum implementation refers to all activities that involve fact-finding about the people, place, and processes prior to implementation of the new curriculum. So this phase involves designing data collection instruments and tools as well. At this stage, curriculum planners make decisions about who will lead this process and what role the curriculum planners or developers will play in the curriculum implementation process. And I talk about this in the context of our centralized education system for the lower levels of our education system. So pre-preparation requires data collection regarding the 3 Ps I mentioned. Let's take place. Data will be needed about the school type, the community context as it relates to resources, socioeconomic status, traditions, and unique practices, and what matters most in the ways of operating in the particular school and community. For people, curriculum planners or developers will need to ascertain who are the most experienced in the place, who are the power brokers, what communicates value, what has been their past experiences regarding the implementation of previous curriculum changes, how do they communicate and relate to each other, what general support they need, and who are potential curriculum implementation leaders. regarding processes, data collection at this stage must ascertain what administrative systems are in place, how these have been functioning, and what processes have worked or not worked in the past. So in this pre-preparation phase for curriculum implementation, we're also seeking to find answers to two key questions. One, what does research say about curriculum that has been previously implemented in this context or in this institution? And two, what curriculum implementation leadership behaviors and approaches are most suitable for the context? From the data collected, curriculum planners should be able to name the curriculum implementation leaders who will then work with them to interpret and understand the data collected about the place, the people, and its processes, the curriculum implementation models, the communication strategy needed, and designing tools for collecting further data during the next phases of curriculum implementation. The purpose of the data gathered here then in this phase can be used to design a preliminary implementation plan. This is crucial for building relationships between those who have developed the curriculum, meaning the curriculum planners, those who will serve as facilitators and enablers of the implementation, and those who are leading implementation of the curriculum. Furthermore, such an approach is more likely to facilitate greater buy-in for the new curriculum, as the people on the ground may feel more involved in decision making. This would then feed into the other phases of implementation. And note I mentioned earlier a preliminary implementation plan, because a curriculum implementation plan at this stage must be flexible enough to adjust based on data that will emerge from the other stages in light of whatever the changes are happening in the context in which the curriculum is being implemented. So I've pulled together what I promote as a framework for curriculum implementation leadership. And in that framework, you will notice that it emphasizes the process of data collection, because implementation leadership is evidence-based. In the same way, the field from which it comes, implementation science, is evidence-based. And so data is needed to drive all the actions that need to occur. At this juncture of the lecture, as I'm looking to close, I want to zero in on one area that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the implementation leadership scale, and that's the idea of self. The fact that you're going to be interrogating self as a leader. I want to mention self in curriculum implementation leadership and its importance. I want to hone in on this a little bit, because I want to draw our attention to the decolonizing and anti-colonial dimension that is embedded in the work of effective curriculum implementation leadership. This idea of self I am situating within our colonial legacy, which then renders all of us as possessing coloniality that we must each wrestle with if we are to respond adequately to each of the dimensions of the implementation leadership scale. Meaning, if we are to really deconstruct and reconstruct ourselves in relation to proactive leadership, supportive leadership, knowledgeable leadership, and perseverant leadership, we must wrestle with ourselves. We must wrestle with the coloniality that's within us based on our history and our legacy as Jamaicans. The curriculum implementation leader, whether at the macro, meso, micro level, must wrestle with self as they seek, or he or she seek, to influence the use of curriculum. Leaders must ask questions such as, what knowledge, experience, beliefs, pet peeves do I bring to this process? How can these help or hinder successful curriculum implementation in this place? This is a deconstruction of the self to see the biases and design strategies for working around them. So the implementation leader must undergo a process of ongoing reflection during all the phases of curriculum implementation. Wrestling with self also involves being comfortable with being uncomfortable, as change often requires individuals to work outside of their comfort zone in order to find the productive zone in disequilibrium, or in the chaos or in the messiness of curriculum implementation. Thus, an understanding of how to utilize the various stages of transition to lead, manage, and be productive is crucial. Because the equilibrium among people, place, and processes matter, not just the technicalities. And so I close by offering these few thoughts. Yes, it has been a long talk so far. Curriculum implementation is complex. It's a complex undertaking, but within such complexity resides opportunities for deliberate and strategic focus on the principles of curriculum implementation leadership. Given that curriculum implementation leadership is data-driven, all curriculum implementation leaders must understand that one key aspect of their role is to demonstrate adaptive and influencing behaviors that are responsive to the data being collected as curriculum is being implemented. In other words, for each curriculum implementation leader to be successful at influencing change during curriculum implementation, he or she must be willing to spend adequate time observing and collecting data, interpreting data, and designing interventions based on the data collected. If this is not practiced, even with all the adequate resources, curriculum implementation will be unsuccessful, as problems may not be properly diagnosed and the real issues that affect successful implementation will persist. As I argue for a focus on curriculum implementation leadership, I also recognize that there are times when curriculum implementation is driven by political expediency. But I argue that such expediency must be properly managed so that curriculum implementation leaders can carry out their responsibilities appropriately and responsibly. The data gathered on curriculum implementation at the lower levels of the education system in Jamaica show that the factors that affect successful curriculum implementation have largely remained the same throughout the years, regardless of the quality of the curriculum developed. As such, curriculum implementation leadership is being promoted by me as a forward-thinking strategy for reducing the various operational factors that affect successful curriculum implementation. Consequently, my hope is that leveraging this strategy will lead to better curriculum implementation. And if there is better curriculum implementation, the hope is that better curriculum and student outcomes will be realized. Thank you for listening to me. So I've said to you that I've been tinkering with these ideas, but I leave with you on the screen this 2025 book publication of mine, where I wrestle with these ideas in some other ways: curriculum implementation, leadership, and equity in education. And this is published by Roofe, so it's available on all platforms. So if you really want to engage further with these ideas, you can do so. Professor Kincaid Clark, allow me just a few minutes more, right? It's my day. Thank you for that. I'm not seeing him in this room, but I want to spend some time in these few minutes to acknowledge some people. Mr. Carlos Brown, a gentleman who I met when I was doing my first degree at the University of Technology. And I know it's because of the hurricane why he's not here, and his connectivity, his telephone is not receiving signals, etc., but he's okay. Mr. Brown introduced me to the root of the MPhil PhD program at the UWI while I was completing my first degree at UTech. And I consider Mr. Brown a very humble and brilliant human being. At the time, he was the Assistant Chief Education Officer for Evaluation and Monitoring in the Ministry of Education. And it was simply a joy for him to mentor students. And I want to say to you, at that time, I did not know about this MPhil PhD route. And because he was connected to the people in natural sciences, Mr. Brown actually went in those days and got a physical copy of the application and brought it to me and said, this is what you should do. And he's the reason I am an academic, because at that time I was not thinking about doing a master's, much less MPhil or PhD. And so when I came to UWI, my other colleagues really did not understand what program I was doing, because I was in a class with everybody who was doing the master's, but I was doing the MPhil. And so each time I would explain, I did not really understand what I was doing at the time. But Mr. Brown said that he thinks I'm brilliant, what am I doing with my life, etc. And so obedient I was. And Mr. Brown doesn't like the spotlight, right? So that's why there is not even a recording of him. But he's somebody that I still continue to maintain a relationship with. Prof. Zelene Jennings-Craig, who you met earlier through her speech, as a mentor, my thesis supervisor, and the person who gave me my first class of 90 undergraduate students in NELT, right? And at that time, I was still not as big as I am, right? But Prof thought I could do it. When Prof asked me to teach that group, I didn't even know that Prof Jennings knew my name. I would just go to class, do my work, submit my assignments, and that's it. I was quiet then, not like the troublemaker I am now. I want to add to this, somebody who is in the room, Dr. Susan Anderson, who saw me in the corridor, yes, Dr. Anderson, after one of my many visits to Prof. Jennings' office, and said to me, listen, I hope you are focusing on your research. In as much as you are doing all of these other things, make sure you're doing the research. And from then, and most of us know Dr. Anderson, right? I didn't know her at that time, but I knew her in that moment. And later on, I continued to build a very cordial relationship with her, to the point where, as Prof mentioned, seeing me in Canada at the American Educational Research Association by my lonesome self. And Dr. Anderson said, where I go? Come with me. And of course, I followed them because it was good to see familiar faces. I know Professor Hutton has a story about that conference as well. I want to also acknowledge Professor Lorraine Cook, and she's going to be surprised by this. Prof. Cook, where are you? And it's important. I met Prof. Cook when I was an MPhil student here at UWI, and she has continued to be a research partner, an informal coach, a guide, a research buddy, and just somebody who I continue to bounce ideas off. And you would have heard from Mrs. Michelle Stewart McCoy, who I met at the same time with Prof. Cook while doing the MPhil program. And these relationships I've maintained because we met up, you know, in courses and continue to enjoy the camaraderie of these colleagues. You met Prof. Miller on the screen, who I met 2012, and I just brought a paper to him and said, give me your honest feedback on this. And boy, it was more than honest. But what he did, he's in the field of leadership, and so some of my work is in that field. But what he also did was to expose me to professional networks that I could then use in the way that I wanted to use them to achieve the objectives that I wanted to achieve, which was really around the area of writing and publishing. Professor Stafford Griffith, you met him, but I'm spending a little time to talk about these colleagues because you don't get here just by yourself, right? Prof. Griffith employed me in 2015 and made me believe that the professorship was in closer reach than I thought. Prof would see me in the corridor along with Professor Kincaid Clark. Prof would see me in the corridor and say, "How is the publication going?" And I didn't want to pass him. I didn't want to see him because at that time, you know, you're struggling to get the publications going and you have all of these things going on. But it was his way of reminding you that this is important. And I mentioned Prof. Kincaid Clark because as a new colleague coming into the School of Education, her officer would pass and she would say to me, "How are you on the publication?" And again, that time, you really don't want to talk about those things because you're struggling. But she was very clear that this is what you need to be engaging in and would always be talking about it. And we will be celebrating her soon as well to rise to the rank of professorship. My graduate students in the curriculum and instruction program. I want to salute them. I want to honor them. Every idea that I would have published from I got to UWI would have been first tested in the courses that I taught. And they would have been open, flexible, and available for me to test those ideas. So thank you, my graduate students, past, present. I honor you for the ways in which you have supported me. You have heard from Dr. Rainford, who spoke earlier, and she mentioned, I'm not sure if she was the one who mentioned it or Professor Kincaid Clark, but the rigor it takes to go through this process of application for professorship at the UWI. You heard Prof. Griffith talk about the UWI's standards. When you make it to the UWI in any capacity, senior lecturer, professor, you can go anywhere and make it. The US standards are rigorous. So, Dr. Rainford, thank you for walking the journey with me and for being supportive and for being steady and patient when I would get frustrated with the process because I need to talk about the work in a particular way and I don't like it. I want to thank you for that, for being steady. We miss you in the School of Education. Professor Cohenberg, yes, I want to mention you. Professor Cohenberg became a new dean after Professor Warburg, another stalwart who would have supported me in my application for senior lecturer and also professorship. She was a new dean at the time, and we had a conversation, and Prof. Cohenberg said to me, "So when are you applying for professorship?" And I said, "I'm not sure, I'm thinking about it because of so and so and so." And she said, "But I've seen your stuff and it would be an honor to present your case." And I never forget that. And it was an honor, privilege working with you, Prof. Cohenberg, in going through this process. Thank you for the support and thank you for the ways in which you have encouraged me even on this leadership journey. Prof. Cohenberg has other ideas about what I should do and become in the university. But those of you who know me know that the other thing I want to, the other group of persons at UWI, my administrators in the School of Education, and I'm not talking about administrators who support me because I'm now director of the School of Education, but these were colleagues. I want to mention Miss Lawson, who as a new colleague, I was coming from class and I was saying, I have all these things that I need to get typed out. I don't have research assistant and so on. And Miss Lawson said, "I can type it for you." And from then on, she has been a consistent support in terms of typing. Anything I have written that I want help with, she would support me on it. And just for the encouraging words from all the other administrators, I have a good relationship with them because they are always encouraging me and always thinking that there are other things for me to do. Miss Susie, I want to highlight because Miss Susie facilitates my late nights and my early mornings, and she knows she has to check if Prof is in the office upstairs so that she don't lock her up in there. And first thing in the morning is Miss Susie, I see. So thank you, Miss Susie. I want to then close with this other group that represents my foundation and my fountain from which I draw each time. And this group is my family. They have carried me as a first-generation teacher, lecturer, academic, higher education administrator, etc., etc. In this moment, I salute you and honor you because your love has kept me going. You have been consistent. And I want to say to all of you, 3/4 of the time, they have no clue what I'm doing. They do not understand it, but they're always there, sometimes with frustrating calls about where are you, have you landed, etc. Can you all just stand, my family? Huh? Oh, I need to tell you who they are? Okay, so I want to start with the matriarch, Mrs. Nona Roofe, otherwise known as Mama. So every trip to a conference or a fellowship or wherever begins with a prayer at the airport. She's always praying for us because, again, you know, she knows that that is what keeps us grounded. So thank you, Mama. Next, you have Elaine Roofe, but her yard name is Dorrit, and I won't say the other one. This is my sister, right? Who says she's my biggest supporter? So there's a competition going on about who is the biggest supporter. Thank you. Beside her is my queen, my heartbeat, my princess, my daughter, Kalian, who has lived this academic journey with me. She knows what it is like, and now she's at a stage where I can ask her to read something and she gives me feedback. Thank you, my darling, for staying the course and for being a good daughter. I have no complaints. Adrian is standing right there, is my nephew in the shades, right? Adrian Edwards. His mom is one of my sisters, Patsy. She's not here with us, no longer with us in the flesh. She died. But she was one of the first investors in my education, a big supporter. And so we continue to carry the legacy. Jacette, my cousin, everybody knows each time I go to Terra Nova Hotel, I'm getting an extra something because she works there and is my Thank you. My darling niece, Shanice, Zaya as you call this, and I'm off script. My darling niece, Shanice, she's like a sister, not a sister, a daughter, I should say. She fills in the gap when I'm not able to do mommy duties in the ways I should. So she will stay with Kalian, she will drive, she will do all the things, my special bonononous niece. And then my brother-in-law, Michael, who helps me out many times when I have to do the academic work. He will take Mama to the doctor or wherever she needs to go to support the family as well. So thank you, Michael. Valda, she's my eldest sister. Lord have mercy. There was a time when she was living in Grand Cayman, and every morning, every day, there was a call. And for you who have relatives who are away, they're asking about the thing 10 times as if you're not going to do it. But that's her, but very supportive, you know, always asking, you eat, or come around the house, I have something for you, or I'm going to drop off something on the veranda for you. Thank you, my sister. I think you all can sit now. Okay. But the tribe is big. We thought we were small at one point, and there are some others who are not here. I have a sister, Jasmine, who is in Kuwait. She teaches there. And Jasmine is the youngest amongst us. And I just want to say as well, those pictures that you see going around each time, like the one that was used with a flyer. One day, Jasmine called me and said, you need some professional photos. You cannot continue like this. And she literally sent the money to say, go, I'm sending you to go and do the photos. And so I thank her for that. They're very supportive. I want to mention my brother who is not here because he's away at the moment. But this brother we rely on, my only blood brother. And he helps to keep us steady. And I want to thank him for the support. Each time I get a promotion at the UE, he thinks it comes with a lot of money. And I have to spend time explaining to him that, no, I wish it was otherwise, right? My Uncle Ivan, who is like a father, other uncles, all my nieces, and I have a cousin who is a sister, Sarah. In the US, they say Sarah. Thank you. Other nephews who are not in the audience, but who are probably watching online, who always make me feel like I'm the best aunt in the world. Grand and great-grand nieces and nephews, cousins, friends, and especially there are some friends in the audience who have become sisters, their family, right? And I'm not going to call any names, so yes, I'm not going to ask them to stand for you to ask me to do that. But maybe I should ask them to stand, yes. The friends who are like sisters and brothers, please stand if you think you are that. I'm not calling any names because I don't want to get in any trouble. Obviously, they're not here. Thank you, Sharon. All right, that's okay. I know why they're not standing. Reverend Henlin, who became my pastor in recent years, who somehow has eyes everywhere. So if there's a flyer, if there's something on Mona messaging, he gets it before I tell him. So I have no choice but to be decent. Reverend Henlin, thank you for being such a strong support to me. There was a previous pastor I had, Reverend Kalam, who would have played a significant role in some of the things that I'm able to do and the ways in which I'm able to lead. That part of my life is very important. There are three men who I want to mention quickly and then just close. And these three men are like brothers who carry me. One is in the audience and didn't want to stand, but I'm going to ask him to stand because he's here. Severite Scott. He's sitting beside his wife and he doesn't want to stand. We call him Roofe. And I ask him to stand because for some of you who are young, there was a time when we really didn't have access to laptop and even desktop computers, meaning it was a rarity. So we used to write our assignments and submit them. But this gentleman standing, who was a church brother, still a church brother, would take the assignments and type them out for me. And so I want to salute you for your generosity of spirit, because that was kindness, free of charge, no pay. I just write it out and give it to him, and he would type it and return it, which means that I had to prepare way in advance, right? Maybe that's where the habit came from. Thank you. There is one slide that I have left because I could not close this lecture without honoring the man, Daniel Roofe. I think I've been fortunate to grow up with two strong parents, the husband of Nona. Daniel Roofe was a father who was protective, caring, principled, disciplined. We lost him in 2014 when I went on a trip, Prof. Jennings mentioned it, to Australia, fellowship for a period, and I had to return. And to this day, I have the image of him in my mind, of the shirt he was wearing when I went to look for him to say to him that I'm going to be leaving tomorrow. And, I came back, we organized this funeral, etc., because I'm not the eldest, but sometimes they treat me as if I'm the eldest. But Daniel Roofe, I think we all carry his essence. But as I get older, I realize how much of his essence that I carry. As I grew up in Barton's, Bamberidge, that place and that community. And so I also want to thank the elders of that community who have poured into me, because he was like a village lawyer. So he took care of everybody's business. He was the counselor. He was the one who talked politics, but he's not going to vote. But, he was that father that I think every girl needs and should have. And the pictures you are seeing, it's not me. But the first one is a picture of him holding a grandchild. And the second one is a great-grandchild. And I chose those pictures because these pictures represent the legacy that we all continue to carry as the generations grow and evolve. So, colleagues, friends, as I look back on the years and try to enjoy this moment, mentors, present heads who have now formed new family, deans who have met along this journey, I want to say you have contributed to who I am, and I am because of you. So thank you for your support. I am humbled by it, and I deeply appreciate it.
All right, colleagues, thank you so much. Before you go, just want to highlight the other deans who are in the presentation, just to highlight Professor Michael Taylor from the Faculty of Science and Technology, Professor Plummer from the Faculty of Medical Sciences, we are seeing his back, Dr. Heather Ricketts from the Faculty of Social Sciences. Thank you so much. I think what this shows is what community and support is like. And that really is, we have to celebrate that. Carmel, that was an excellent presentation. It was long, but it was excellent. And I just want to say, we look forward to more of this and more of your work. You have you're clearly showing that you are breaking down barriers, and you're removing boundaries from what curriculum, the traditional understandings of curriculum are. And so I just want to say thank you so much for that, for centering curriculum implementation leadership and what that looks like. Colleagues, it's a bit late. I know that we have questions and answers, and we also have a very important thing that I really want us to do. So if we can quickly do questions and answers, I'm going to ask Dr. Ferguson to lead that, perhaps one or two questions, and then we have a very important, the vote of thanks from Ms. Shanika McGowan-Hunter.
Okay. Oh, wow. All right. Thank you, Professor Kincaid-Clark. Professor Roofe, congratulations on your moment, on your achievement, and all that you have accomplished. We celebrate you. All right, so rich, deep, and meaningful. So I know that a multitude of questions would have been stimulated, but in keeping with the tightness, we're going to allow for 2. So do we have any questions from anyone in the audience or online? Yes, yes. Do we have a roaming mic or no? Okay, yes.
Thank you. So let me first start by congratulating my colleague. Yes, you hear it? No. Like sound. Let me try again. No.
But we can hear you.
It's recorded. Yes, it's on now. So let me start by congratulating my colleague, Professor Carmel Roofe, for what I consider to be a really very outstanding professorial lecture, touching on so many areas that are not only education, related, but certainly also policy. Carmel, largely because I come from, the policy space, and I could see the intersection. You have stressed a lot on the issue of curriculum implementation leadership, and I think social policy implementation leadership might also be helpful in addition to the medical field I think you might have paid attention to. I wanted to ask you a question about the knowledgeable leadership. You had actually a slide with 4 quadrants, I believe. And you mentioned that it includes the benefits of the new curriculum ideas. And I wondered whether it shouldn't also include the gaps. Because I see the knowledgeable leadership as also speaking to the issue of monitoring and evaluation. So as I am implementing or leading the implementation of the curriculum, I'm also paying attention to the gaps in the curriculum as I see them and being able to feed back that information to the developers of the curriculum. I believe you might have touched on it. And I wanted to close by saying, as a sociologist, I would imagine that curriculum development would ask the question, start with a question, what kind of society do we want or need? And I find that the curriculum is not necessarily asking, as I have seen a few. I mean, I'm not a specialist like you are and your colleagues in education. And what competencies will the society require? And when I heard you raise the issue of self, I said, Carmel is onto it. The issue of self and coloniality, that issue is extremely important in my mind to this question of what kind of society do we want and need, and what competencies will that society require. Yesterday I had an experience in a particular place. I went to a fast food establishment, and I just did sociology for about the 45 minutes that I sat to order and to wait. And it was a different Jamaica. And I saw all the pathologies. And I just saw how it would play out in education, in the job market, etc., etc. And that issue of self and coloniality came, squarely to the fore, as I said. Thank you, Carmel.
Yeah. I hope I will remember the questions. But
the question
thank you
really about the knowledgeable leadership.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ricketts. I think if we read all the policy documents about what early childhood education is supposed to do, what primary, what secondary, etc., and tertiary, we will find ideas about what we are working towards. And if I take the last curriculum for the secondary level, the national standards curriculum, it does provide a very detailed view of what competences the student is supposed to have. If you read as well the messages from the policymakers, politicians, and the technocrats about that curriculum, all of the messages speak to what we're supposed to be working towards in terms of the ideal Jamaican. And for those persons who align with our 2030 vision, some of those things, you could see the alignment with those things. I ended up at implementation leadership because of that. Our policy documents are very good. Our curriculum documents are very good in terms of detailed, clear, etc. But we're not getting the kinds of outcomes that we want as a society. So I think if we spend more time focusing on the things that meet the road, which is what I call the operational things, all right? And this is where the implementation leadership that I'm promoting comes in. Where in addition to the things that we want to achieve at the macro level and are communicated up there, we need to now spend time to walk that through in very deliberate and intentional ways so that they will trickle down and also trickle up, which is a combination of those who are within the belly of the work and those who are making the decisions about what should happen. So for me, I think I did not spend time talking about curriculum development because curriculum development takes that into consideration. And curriculum implementation is one component of curriculum development. The idea of knowledgeable leadership, yes, involves the gaps as well, because one of the questions I did mention is that you must collect data about what would have happened with the curriculum ideas that were implemented before. So you need that data. The knowledgeable leadership means you have to spend time studying what is the new idea that is being put forward. And as you are saying as well, the data that tells you about what would have happened before and what is currently happening in a particular context. And I keep talking about context because schools are different in our system. And we have a centralized education system. But I think curriculum implementation leadership also calls for some of those activities to be decentralized in a particular way. So knowing about the innovation in terms of what drives it, what are the components, what makes it up, what is needed to implement it. So studying it. One of the areas that I did not highlight with the newest curriculum that was implemented, the NSC, when it came into being and up to now, there are persons who are leading the implementation who do not understand the components of the national standards curriculum, and they are leading people to implement it. So we are saying knowledgeable leadership would require you to know, to study, to understand the components and also understand and know the specific leadership behaviors that are necessary to get it going. So I hope that answers. Yeah.
I have been told that we can have one more question because, so Mr. Clark, go ahead, and then we will close.
Thank you very much. Professor Roofe, it's a pleasure to have listened to you and to have witnessed the greatness that you embody and that you continue to demonstrate over the years. I am very intrigued in terms of curriculum implementation, leadership, because I've seen the phrasing of it and I've been struggling with it because I'm wondering how do you put these three words together? And so thank you for explaining and taking us through. I do have a few questions. I'll just put them on the table.
Just one,
one
Mr.
question.
Clark, yes.
Let me see how well I can do with my language.
And Mr. Clark is a past student of mine, so I understand. Also one of my mentee, I can say that proudly. Yes.
Thank you. Yes. So, Prof, as you spoke about the self in all of this, the question that I'm now left with, and I hope that you can perhaps help me to understand it as I leave, looking at the context, the self in context, what are the implications for the many and diverse roles and responsibilities of the leader, and if, as a country, we should move forward with curriculum implementation leadership, would it be more ideal to recruit one or someone who is adequately trained, highly reflective, to ascend to leadership in the school, knowing the context and the orality of the situation, rather than finding someone who is external to the school and then having to learn and navigate the school culture and all of those things to then lead curriculum implementation?
All right. So thank you for that question. So curriculum implementation leadership, as I said, sits in the belly of the work. So you're not coming from outside and there's nobody being assigned. That's why the pre-preparation phase of the curriculum implementation process is important. I think sometimes we do not remember that this is a process which has built into it this monitoring and evaluation that Dr. Ricketts spoke about. And so the pre-preparation phase talks about going into the space and finding the person or the persons. There is instructional leadership, which is different, and we would need another lecture to probably talk about that, because that leadership is what you'd find in terms of a person that you're talking about who is knowledgeable and so on. But implementation leadership is about the people who are within the space and knowing and identifying the peculiarities of these people. I did a publication on teacher leadership, and I think that publication perhaps is instructive and would have probably influenced some of my ideas. In that, the teacher leaders in the schools were not people who were assigned formal roles, but they were doing the work of supporting whole school development, educating their other colleagues through professional development that nobody asked them to take on, but they were doing it. Developing materials and resources that schools need, going into the community and liaising with community members and so on. So when I think of that kind of teacher leader who is not assigned a formal role by anyone or a position by anyone, but does this work, and the research that we did suggested that there are more people who are like that. I'm suggesting that curriculum implementation leadership calls us to develop the tools to find those people and utilize them to help us to lead curriculum. Does that answer?
So, thank you so much, Professor Roofe. We are going to close off now because of time, but I do want to acknowledge that online we have a question from Dr. Clovis Nelson. I'm going to invite her to make contact with Prof. Roofe because it's a very interesting and involved question surrounding anthropological understanding and how that can help us with respect to curriculum implementation leadership. Thank you so much, Professor Roofe, and congratulations again.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen. We could go on and on, right? But all good things must come to an end. All right. So We have been entertained, we have been challenged, and we have been inspired. It is my task this evening to move the vote of thanks, and that I must do. But before I do so, with permission from our chair, in the spirit of giving thanks, I have two very short poems to read from those whom Professor Roofe mentored. Very short poems from two groups of students. One of them, the class of 2026, she wrote her poem in tribute to Yes, 2026. Yes, she has not graduated as yet, in essence, right? And so she wanted her tribute to be read in Jamaican Creole, so bear with me. Me give thanks for Professor Roofe. Professor Roofe, your light guide me through each day with care and wisdom, showing me the way. Always prepared, always real and true. A mentor with heart, me give thanks for you. You teach with passion, linking life to every plan, turning theory into lessons we overstand. Down to earth, yet truly divine in your role. You teach each student mind, heart, and soul, flowing forever, deep and free, like the endless strength at the Caribbean Sea. That's your 2026, one of the members of your class of 2026 that you met. And the last one is from the class of 2023. Very brief as well, not in Jamaican Creole though. Nothing short of transformative is the long, fulfilling walk through the landscape of curriculum and instruction with you, Professor Roofe. Each step with you reshapes our teaching muscles and sharpens our professional vision. You are a rare gift, the ability to help us see ourselves as teachers, who we were, who we are, and who we might yet become with reflection and purpose. After a course with you, Professor Roofe, our psychology, our sociology, and even our very phenomenology of ourselves and our students are forever changed. You invite us to imagine curriculum, to question what is taught, why it is taught, and how it is taught. Your passion is contagious. You challenge us to examine our thinking through the eyes of every stakeholder in education. And in doing so, we begin to truly see the truth. Professor Roofe, you raise the bar for educators everywhere. You urge us to understand our current educational realities, to weigh our subjects and options carefully, and to act with vision and courage as we shape the future. Thank you, Professor Roofe. I felt compelled to read those two thank yous. Now it is my honor this evening. We are winding down. I believe I'm the last voice you will hear this evening, so it's my honor. So all protocols observed, I want to extend heartfelt gratitude to all who made this evening's inaugural professorial lecture a memorable success. Our deepest appreciation goes to Professor Carmel Roofe. You introduced us to your village, which we appreciate, for a thought-provoking and inspiring lecture that reminded us of the types of curriculum, the messiness of the curriculum implementation process. You also informed us of the history behind curriculum implementation in Jamaica. You informed us of the 3 Ps, the people, the process, and the place. And thank you, Prof, for guiding us through your theorizing about curriculum implementation leadership and for sharing with us those 4 quadrants: proactive leadership, supportive leadership, knowledgeable leadership, and perseverant leadership. And for concluding with us a framework for us to ponder, the framework for curriculum implementation leadership for evidence-based practice. And thank you. We salute you for your scholarship, your mentorship, and unwavering commitment to advancing the curriculum agenda. Special thanks to our chairperson, distinguished guests, university leadership, faculty, colleagues, and students for your presence and participation. We're also grateful to the mentors, speakers, and moderators who enrich the program with their insights. To our administrative and technical teams, Mrs. Hales Johnson, Ms. McFarlane, Mrs. Ricketts, Ms. Stevenson, Ms. Nadine Brown, Ms. Myers, Ms. Keys, Mrs. Meredith Tullo, Ms. Chapman, and Ms. Nadine Davis. Thank you for your efficiency and dedication behind the scenes. Finally, to each member of the audience who have remained and for those who are online, thank you for celebrating with us as we honor Professor Roofe's distinguished contribution to academia. May tonight's reflection continue to inspire us to lead, innovate, and reimagine curriculum beyond policy. Thank you, everyone.